So welcome everybody. I'm so excited to have you all here. We're so grateful to have you all present with us this evening for this very important and timely panel discussion about fair maps. We have some excellent panelists joining us tonight. Before I introduce them, I would like to say a few words about some of the people and organizations that have helped with preparations that have helped make tonight possible. The Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice is the initial organization that got the ball rolling with this event. WNPJ is a network that aims to facilitate activities, cooperation, and communication among Wisconsin organizations and individuals working towards the creation of a sustainable world free from violence and injustice. The network is committed to learning from and following from the leadership and vision of Frontline Communities as we all move towards a just transition and true peace. We're grateful to have several co-sponsors for tonight's event and would like to recognize them now. Our co-sponsors are Progress North, which is where I am from, and also a panelist, Cheyenne, our Wisconsin Revolution, the Fair Maps Coalition, Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, Expo, Family Farm Defenders, and Building Unity. We'll share their websites in the chat later so you can familiarize yourselves with their important work. And there's also just a few specific individuals that helped to get this event set up that we would like to thank. Deborah Gillespie, Erica Bach, and Mary Kay Baum helped us connect with all of our panelists. Also, Vicki Berenson and Justice Pecci are holding down everything tech related for us tonight. And before we hop into it and I introduce you to all of our panelists tonight, we're going to go over a little bit of why we're here and what we're going to be talking about. We're here to talk about fair maps. Fair maps is an issue that the entire state of Wisconsin. At the same time, we know that frontline communities are underrepresented in decision-making as it relates to electoral politics. And gerrymandering presents significant obstacles to their voices being heard specifically. Frontline communities is a term that comes from climate activists and describes Black and Indigenous people of color who are struggling with the effects of racism, classism on the front lines. We're using the term frontline communities, which they've learned from the Climate Justice Alliance. And the Climate Justice Alliance is a national network of Black and Indigenous, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, and poor white communities working for environmental justice. Frontline communities are those communities which are most impacted by the exploitative, extractive economy and systemic racism. So that's a little background about who we are hearing from today. And tonight is an opportunity for our frontline leaders to be in dialogue with one another about having muting problems. We'll be talking with frontline leaders to be in dialogue with one another about their struggles and their vision for true representation. We're all fortunate to be able to listen in as they help deepen our understanding of what's at stake and how we move forward together. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as possible at the end with whatever time we have left. We'll have Justice collecting your questions in the chat, and I will be able to bring them up at the end as we have time.
Here's Joe Miller.
Is this it in this bowl?
We do, about 10 years ago.
There is Joe Miller. Yeah, please everybody, keep your mics muted if you don't happen to be a panelist, just for time reasons and to be respectful to the speakers we have tonight. And so now we will get started introducing our folks. I will ask you all to introduce yourselves separately, and I will begin by saying a little bit about you, and you can then tell us a little bit more. And so Joe, I'll start with Joe. We've heard he's got a fan here tonight. And Joe Miller has been on the tribal council of the Stockbridge-Munsee community for over 25 years. He's in his 9th year on the Bowler School Board and in his 4th year as a county board supervisor for Shawano County. All of his government experience has been nonpartisan and has had no affiliation to any political party. And his priority is his constituents and the environment. So Joe, if you'd like to say a little bit more about yourself and the community you are connected to, and in this time of redistricting.
Thank you, Jade. Greetings, everybody. Mohican, we say kula malse. Are you well? And I also say Anishik Kishela Moko. That is, thank you to our creator for this day. Yeah, my name is Joe Miller. Lived on Stockbridge-Munsee my entire life in the same house. Yeah, my wife and we have my wife and two sons. They're both raised now. Yeah, I've been involved in government as an elected official, but I don't view myself as a politician in any way, shape, or form. I believe in leadership. It's all about leadership and being first in line when the work to be done and last in line when the work's over and the food's being served. It's just kind of a simple philosophy that I believe in very strongly, and I believe that living in an Indian community and other communities, not just Indian communities, but other communities, you know, my Black brothers and sisters, my brown brothers and sisters, my yellow brothers and sisters, my white brothers and sisters, we all share commonality. And if we could ever get to a point back in time where governments would understand and re-institutionalize compromise, consensus, you know, that would be a good thing. We'd like to say in Indian country to the government, you know, make no decision about us without us. The true meaning of consultation. How often are we the victims of decision makings without being given an opportunity to weigh in? You know, Indian country, we are a strong voice. We'll always be a strong voice. We'll always be here. And folks need to understand we're not going anywhere. We don't get back on a boat and go back across the pond. We're not going anywhere. So, but again, I don't want to be too long-winded. So with that in mind, I say again, Anishik, is thank you. And I look forward to participating tonight. Oh.
Thank you, Joe. I love that. I love that. You said make no decision about us without us. I'm carrying that with me. I'm putting that one in my pocket and taking it back. Thank you. So next we're going to introduce Melody Villanueva. Melody is a Milwaukee single mom and activist raised in the Bronx, New York. She's connected with many great organizations, including Moms Demand Action and the Poor People's Campaign and many more. You'll hear from her. And she is working to do her civic duty and create change in the face of what is an all too common tragedy. Melanie, please, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Melody Villanueva, and I'm a mother of two, like she said, born and raised in the Bronx, where I actually learned through public school, the public school system, civic duty and what the meaning of it is, from a whole bunch of wonderful teachers. And I've always believed in we the people. In the 5th grade, student council, and I remember writing to Ronald Reagan, you know, in our class, we had constructive debating. So I really believe in we the people. I know this per se, whatever that, you know, I don't see color, but we're all humans, and that's what I believe. And for me, unless you're Native American, we're all immigrants. So let's just take that and, you know, run with it, because that's what it is. And right now, it is important for us to realize the threat that we all face. It doesn't matter where you're from. I am very impassioned about we the people, and especially our rights. And we have the right to vote. Everyone should vote, be able to vote, every American citizen. So what really pushed me out to jump into activism was 2018 in August. But first, I'm sorry. It was actually the running of the previous leader. Anyway, but I lost my only son, Jakari, who was murdered in 2018. And 4 days before his murder, it was the last time I spoke to him, was to remind him to go vote. So with that, I kept my son in mind, and I was hell-bent on making sure that I was not going to allow tragedy or grief to bring me down or break me. So I used it and turned my tragedy into something positive, and that is to become an activist. I've volunteered, I've canvassed, I was part of Moms Demand, Mothers Against Gun Violence. I met Deborah Gillespie, a wonderful woman, and Poor People's Campaign. So it's, for me, I don't belong to one community. I belong to the United States of America, and we're all in this together. And I know how important it is for local activism, but right now we all need each other from everywhere. And I think that we can do this. As a matter of fact, I know we can do this. We just have to put our minds to it. And because I'm a big believer in when there's a will, there's a way. And there's definitely that will. We just have to make our way.
Yes, thank you so much, Melody. That was so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, we're going to introduce our panelist, Talib Akbar. Talib is a member of Moses and Expo. He has served 20 years in the Wisconsin prison system and has received many awards for his activism since his release. He's the co-author of the play Like an Animal in a Cage. Talib and others are the author of the Solitary Confinement Cell Replica Truck Project. And he is an active member of Moses and Expo fighting against voter suppression in Wisconsin. Talib, if you'd like to introduce yourself for us, please. Oh, you're still on mute. Sorry about that, Talib.
Hi, everybody. My name is Talib Akbar, and I'm happy to be here. Proud that I was invited to participate in this panel because I have something to bring. I'm happy because of what we're talking about in gerrymandering. And after serving 20 years in prison, not being very smart politically about what they're doing inside the prison and how it affects not only me, but my family and the community that I am from. And so I'm geared up and fired up to do something about it. So my concerns primarily was totally about solitary confinement, how it affects a person's life, and how people need to know how important it is to stop the torture, because solitary confinement is torture. And I've served 10 stints in solitary confinement. And so really guaranteed and fortified to let you know that it is torture. You know, on a daily basis, people are going through this torture. But now that I'm out and I'm more focused about what the real problem is, and it's about getting out to vote, So I'm with Moses, and the strongest fight is to fight against voter suppression. The counterpart of it is fraud, voter fraud. Don't have to worry about that too much because there's not very much voter fraud. They know that if they fraud, vote twice, you're going to prison. So people aren't doing that. I'm concerned about voter suppression because voter suppression has something to do closely and it's related to gerrymandering. So people out of away from voting. And I'm just here to work with that. And that's my goal now, is getting out to vote.
Thank you, Talib. Yes, I think it's very important to recognize that gerrymandering is a form of voter suppression. So thank you so much. Next, we are going to move on and introduce Cheyenne Otto-Defoe. Cheyenne is the lead organizer with Progress North. In this key leadership role, she helped lead Progress North's successful organizing efforts to powerfully connect grassroots organizing, issue advocacy campaign, leadership development, and electoral politics in order to win real change in the Northwest region of Wisconsin in 2020 and 2021. Cheyenne's Anishinaabe roots are what guide her through her organizing journey, and she believes that her story sharing, through story sharing, much like her ancestors did and her auntie and uncles do now, we can build back our sense of solidarity. Cheyenne grew up in rural Ashland, Wisconsin, and is an enrolled member of the the Red Cliff Reservation, and now resides in Superior, Wisconsin. She graduated from Northland College in the spring of 2019 with a degree of sociology and social justice, while double minoring in psychology and Native American studies. And she is passionate about breaking down the barriers affecting marginalized communities and knows through solidarity we can do that. Cheyenne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jade. Bonjour, Getaga Kunsakoin and Digitakaz, Ga, Misquabagan, and Dunjaba, Makwa. I said, hello, my name is Cheyenne. I'm from Red Cliff Reservation, I'm Bear Clan. As Jade mentioned, I'm the lead organizer with Progress North. I grew up both on and off the reservation, residing in Ashland, right across the bay from Red Cliff. I now reside in Superior, but as Jade mentioned, the community I feel most connected to, especially during this redistricting process, is definitely Red Cliff and Bad River. As we continue to succumb to the environmental crisis we all know is happening, and the countless other crises our communities are facing, it's definitely critical to prioritize the most vulnerable communities throughout this redistricting process, including our sovereign nations here in Wisconsin. The northwest portion of the state is often forgot about. We all know the saying, anything north of Highway 29, more often than not, is definitely forgotten about. Those rural communities are mostly negatively affected by our policies and the elected leaders' decision-making, including my home reservation. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate all the hard work that went into this planning. So much.
So much, Cheyenne. And last but not least, we're going to introduce Helen J Harris, resident of Milwaukee and a member of the St. Mark African Methodist Episcopal Church. I can't pronounce that, I'm so sorry. She received her education in Milwaukee Public Schools and earned an undergraduate and graduate degrees in elementary education and education administration from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Her lifelong passion has been in the field of education, and she served as a teacher, supervisor, and principal in Milwaukee Public Schools for over 27 years, retiring in 2004. Ms. Harris is currently active in Common Ground, where she serves on the Education Committee. She devotes much of her time to volunteering in schools and working with young people. She has faith that citizens working together for the benefit of all, we can create a better future for our children and a more just society in which they can all thrive. Helen, I would like to introduce you. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I came to Milwaukee with my parents in the late 40s. They were a part of the great migration of African Americans who left the cotton fields of the South for opportunities in the North after the war. There wasn't much to do in the South other than pick cotton. Opportunities were extremely limited. And sometimes my parents would say that they felt like the war opened up things for a lot of Blacks. They got to see around the world. They moved around to different places and saw that things didn't have to be the way they were. And so my dad went to St. Louis first, didn't find a good job there, but he heard from some other people he knew in Milwaukee that there were some good factory jobs. So he came first and sent for my mom and me, and he eventually got a really good job at American Motors, where he worked for many years. My cousins and I were the first generation to graduate from high school and certainly college. because although there were elementary schools for Blacks in most of the towns in the South, typically the high schools were few and far apart. And the Black children could not attend the high schools in their area, in their cities, because they were whites only. So most of us got an education when our parents relocated. If you were lucky and had the means in the South, you might be able to go to a neighboring city where there was a Black school and board with someone and attend that school. Of my mother's 10 brothers and sisters, they were able to afford to send one child to the boarding high school, and no one else was able to do anything other than go to the elementary school. So Milwaukee had opportunities for us. Those were living wages back in the day at American Motors. When they first came, like most immigrants, they lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 other families. 1 family in each bedroom, 1 family in the living room, and 1 family in the dining room. And they made lifelong friends. Eventually, they got enough money to get their own apartment, and they worked hard, they saved their money, and eventually they were able to buy their first house. This is the story of my generation. This is the story of my friends and my relatives. We were able to afford to go to UWM because you could afford it on the salary that your parents made, or you could work and go to school. Now college, the tuition is beyond the means of so many of our children. Everything is so expensive. We no longer have those living wage jobs that can help people sustain their families and put their children through school. So I currently live on the far northwest side of Milwaukee with my husband of 57 years. We have 3 daughters who are married. 2 of the families live in Minneapolis, and 2 of my grandchildren live in Milwaukee as I do, and they attend Milwaukee public schools. So I am very invested in the schools, not only for their sake, but for all of the children. And I want to see our city become the city that it can be. I want to see our city have the autonomy that it needs to make decisions for the people in our city. And we need a legislature that will help us to do this. This is why I'm very concerned about the effects of the gerrymandering, and I have been personally affected by that. And I will share that as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Helen, and thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate it and all of your time. Before we hop into the next question, or the first question, I'd also like to thank Doug Poland, who's here, just joined, for using his legal experience to advocate on behalf of underrepresented people and communities for fair and equitable representation in our state government. He is here. They're planning on providing feedback, especially they're planning on providing feedback, especially in the areas that weren't talked about yesterday at the oral arguments, which is the Native communities in the North, which would be where Cheyenne and I are from. And so just a special thanks to Doug Poland, the block lawyer, who is here tonight. Alrighty, and so I'm going to just hop into the first question here. And if you just want to jump in, if there is one of you who feel particularly drawn to the question, and then if not, I will just call on somebody and we'll see how that goes. So the first question we have for tonight is, we would like to learn more about any opportunities that you've had to provide input in the process of redistricting before the legislature took up the issue. And what was that like for you? Did you feel that you were listened to? Did you submit maps to the People's Maps Commission? Did you use the Dry Your District portal? Did you go to the one public hearing that they had available for folks to join? We'd just like to hear how you have been standing up for the redistricting process.
Well, I'll start. I participated in another forum for a community group, the North Shore Maps. They do so much. It's an East Side group trying to get the word out about gerrymandering and redistricting. And the other thing that I like to do is talk to people, sometimes on a one-on-one, the groups that I go to, just kind of helping to raise awareness about these issues. Because I think 10 years ago, before 2010, 2011, I didn't know what gerrymandering was. You know, I hadn't heard the word, I don't think. But I've come to understand how it has impacted our communities and how it has changed so many things and is preventing so many good things from happening. So I think everything that we can do, everything that I can do to share what I know with my neighbors, with my friends, with the organizations that I belong to just help raise awareness about it so that people will know the questions to ask of their legislatures and will know more about who to vote for. That's kind of where I am with that.
I can jump in and share. Jade and I actually had an opportunity to go down to Madison and speak at the one public hearing that they had. It was obviously due to our privilege to be able to be there. It's a hearing that's at 8 in the morning where most people can't travel down to Madison to be there, especially folks from our portion of the state. I think it's at least a 5-hour drive. I could be wrong, but it's pretty long. But yeah, we went down there and we spent all day watching our elected officials dismiss lived experiences that people were bringing up in front of them. We got to listen to our public officials talk about how our populations are grouped in Wisconsin just naturally. We just naturally flock together, which is not at all what has happened in our history here in Wisconsin. So that was pretty infuriating to listen to. We could talk about redlining. We could talk about the state-sanctioned genocide on my Indigenous peoples. We could talk about all those things. So it was definitely quite frustrating to travel all that way, listen for 8 hours, watch them dismiss the lived experiences that were being presented to them. However, yeah, it was definitely worth our time. And yeah, I guess I could say more and go on about how frustrating it was to look at their faces as people were crying and they're just texting, getting up, walking away. So yeah, and I can share more too, Jade, if you want me to expand, but that's my initial thoughts.
I'd like to hear from Talib and Joe. Did either of you take action in the redistricting, whether it be submitting comment or at that legislative hearing, or even letters to the editor, talking to your community, like Helen said, just sharing this information and making sure folks around you know about it? I'd love to hear how you've been involved.
Go ahead, Talib.
Okay, I'm not all that educated on that particular doorstep, because, and I say that to say this, as you know, I've served 20 years in prison, so a lot of the stuff is behind me, but I follow the leads from the organizations that I'm involved in. And so when it comes down to me about what we need to do, like canvassing and stuff like that, getting people out to vote, and, you know, in an attempt to prevent them from stopping people from voting, that concerns me as well as the organization I'm involved in. And so we get out and do the groundwork. So I'm boots on the ground. I want to commend Cheyenne, Jade, for your participation, but like, I have to admit, I just wasn't aware of it at the time, you know. So me, this light coming on in my head now that, hey, this is what's really going on, you know. I mean, hindsight is 20/20. So you look at it, and that's how they get the best of us. You know, I mean, even in gerrymandering. You know, so that's about all I can speak on that. But to commend the people who were there, you know, and did something. My hats off to you for that.
Thank you, Talib. And to you, my brother, your education through your experience is worth more, worth much more. And I'm glad, I'm very proud to hear, you know, what you're doing down there, and I support you 110% as we all do. So by all means, keep up the good work. Personally, recently, I'd have to give probably the most appreciation to Mary Kay for her support and with me personally on getting a map, how to do the map thing and how to place yourself where you wanted to be. Without her, I probably would not be sitting here tonight. More than likely would not be sitting here tonight. So my hat's off to my big sister. Thank you very much. But my involvement in the state of Wisconsin over the years, I'm very thankful to my community for allowing me the opportunity to represent them for over off and on for the past 30 years and walking the halls of Capitol Hill in Madison, Washington, DC. I wore out a good pair of boots walking the halls of Congress in Washington, DC. But getting out there and being visible, and here in Stockbridge-Munsee, as in all Indian country, we realize how important it is to make, to create relationships, but also to maintain them and the work that goes into maintaining relationships. So face-to-face communication is where we as Indian people like to shine best. It's not been that easy lately in the last couple of years. We've been some pretty significant restriction, as you all can imagine. But with me personally, and with regarding to this gerrymandering issue, it is our intent to be realigned. I say realigned with our brothers and sisters on a Menominee Indian reservation in that assembly district, and I believe also in a Senate district. Now, if things hold true, we might be switching state senators from the Green Bay district to the Northern district. I hope I don't mispronounce names, but I was told we might be placed in the Senate district that is now currently Mary Falkowski, as opposed to where we are now with Robert Coles in Green Bay. We'll work with anybody. But the main thing was in the assembly district to be realigned with Menominee where we were prior to being taken out over a decade ago. I mean, our history over the past 170 years is our history, shared history. We, the Stockbridge-Munsee people, would not be here had it not been for Menominee ceding 2 townships to the United States government for us, where previously we were down on the eastern shores of Lake Winnebago and near what is now Calumet County in the town of Stockbridge in that area. We had been moved, forcibly removed from the East Coast since the Revolutionary War, where our ancestors and even other Indian ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. So it's we have a long, long history. And statesmanship was always, you know, why we were kept. We needed to understand how to talk to people that didn't understand us, and through statesmanship. We have a long history of that, and I hope someday to be remembered as somebody that, you know, as a statesman. That day will probably come 20, 30, 40 years from now, or maybe even after I'm gone. So long story short, that is the main issue regarding this current gerrymandering, to get it stopped, to get solid legislation that we never have to go through this again. I don't understand why one party chooses their, you know, the politicians don't choose their voters, the voters choose the politicians. And that you know, I'm repeating that. Somebody else stated that, so I don't want to plagiarize anything, but it's worth repeating. So with that in mind, we need to be, so we're not sitting back here in these chairs 10, 12 years from now, 10 years from now, talking about the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. And I hope that you saw in the chat, Joe, Mary Kay has thrown in there that you probably made the difference to get the three of the maps originally presented to reunite with Menominee, Stockbridge and Menominee. So thank you so much for your work on fair maps. And also, Joe, speaking of that, that leads me really well into our next question. So our next question is, what do you believe are some of the most pressing struggles facing your community at this time? And I think that that's important, especially for you with having been separated from Menominee and being in a place where you are heavily gerrymandered. I'd love to hear from you first about what are some of the issues pressing your community and why you think gerrymandering may have exacerbated them.
Good question. Whether I can articulate tying the shoestrings together between gerrymandering and the issues facing our community, I think we're no different than every other community in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to rampant. We're not immune to drug abuse. We're not immune to that. We have a lot of young people. We've lost people, young people. Whether that comes from a sense of hopelessness or whatever it comes from, economy. That's one issue. Education of our young children. You know, that's why I'm on a Boulder School Board. Education, it's an issue that we are very strong, and we as a people have emphasized in our culture and our tradition ever since 1609 when Henry Hudson sailed up the Hudson River, which was then called the Mahikanac. We are the people of the waters that are never still. Ever since then, so we figured out the best way to understand them is to get to, be educated and get to know. So we can use that for our protection and safe being. I've always been an advocate of, my focus, my philosophy, and my people's philosophy is real simple about the circle of life. Big people helping little people become big people themselves through whatever means to foster them for the young people to grow. It's as simple as I can make what consider my meaning of life is. So with the young people and seeing to them, watching them grow, given the same opportunity that I had when I was little in this community and the strength of community. All too often now it's shrunk and I might, not that this particular format, however, the abuses of social media is not helping. It's dividing, it's continuing to create wedges, the abuse of it. Granted, yes, it has its place and it's a very useful tool when it's used correctly. But when I see and hear young people contemplating a long-term solution to a temporary problem and contemplating suicide, that hits to the heart. So with that in mind, I'm gonna concede here for a little bit and let my fellow participants here have their share. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. And as we welcome back Melody here, I'm going to repeat the question that has been asked. The question that we're asking of the panelists now are, what do you believe are some of the most pressing struggles facing your community at this time? And we've got a second question, and I'm just going to kind of shove them together, but that is, how do you think gerrymandering might have been exacerbating these struggles? And if you'd like to answer them separately or together, please. And also, please don't feel that you have to jump in right away. It was just Joe who's answered this question, so you can have some time to collect yourself coming back to the meeting if you feel.
No, thank you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but what I think, I look at it at a prism of, like, I belong to the community of America, so affecting all of us is what we need to face. The fact is that the racism, the white extremist, supremacist, domestic terrorist ideology that is been infused in the fabric of our nation. But with the Constitution, there are protections for people like us. And where I see it's going is the class perspective. You know, you gotta be rich, a millionaire to have a seat at the table. And that's not how our founders wanted the United States to be. So we do in fact supposed to pick our elected officials, and we do in fact have a right to remove them, not only when it's election time. I think that with our experiences as a society for the past 5-10 years, we can see the politicians that have came into play on either side, because right now this is not about Democrat or Republican, this is about American. Okay, it is about the people, because that's where I stand. That's where I believe that we all need to stand, because there's a question being posed to all of us. This is a fight for our democracy against tyranny, and we have to decide whether we're going to continue to abide by that ideology of racism, of superiority in their eyes, or we're going to abide by what we believe in God, no matter what you call him. God is truth and God is love. So I think moving forward, we all need to see each other as brothers and sisters again. What happens to one of us happens to all of us. So I think that we need to really put our foot down and find the tools that we need as the people, which we do under our Constitution, if we're really reading it in the Bill of Rights. You know, yeah, it can be tweaked, but the unalienable rights that we have are connected to almost like the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, you know, thou shalt not call anybody else or look up to anybody else, especially a man, and call him God or act as if he's God. But as far as our people and everyone, okay, we need to really determine what we're going to do with what's going on is the racism. So this is as much as the people of color's fight as it is even more so the white man's fight, the white woman's fight. And we need to take it there. We need to ask those tough questions. And as far as the freedom of press, yes, they are needed. They are very important. But we, as the people, need to see what news also is making a play in our society and dividing us. We need to recognize that that propaganda outlet, which I call it the Putin's playbook of propaganda, to intentionally harm, mislead, and spread disinformation to the public intentionally. So we can put a stop to it. And I don't think of allowing dollars to get in the way or allowing a person's skin to get in the way. No, we need to do it. And we need to do it now because this is affecting all of us. And look at the 7 states. We talk about gerrymandering. Unfortunately, that's a part of it, but the root of the problem is the racism behind all that cover up of policies and laws or whatever. Let's just nip it in the bud and call it what it is.
Thank you, Melody. And Helen, I see that you came off of mute. I would like to see if you'd like to answer the question now.
Well, one of the things I definitely agree with the last speaker. I think racism is a big part of it. And also with Joe, because there's such a disparity between the have and the have-nots. We have moved from having a large middle class and a few on the top real high and a few on the bottom real low. So now we have a few people at the top that own the vast majority of the wealth, and the rest of us are fighting over the pennies that are left. And I think a lot of the problems that we talk about, the litany of problems in the cities that we talk about, are actually just symptoms of this big disparity that's going on with the wealth. And what I see in the city is that we are being choked. We're being choked because we don't have the resources or the autonomy to run the city the way we want to provide the things that we need to make the city whole. We're using the property tax to try to do everything because we can't get sufficient funding from the state. We talk about the schools, but there's a flaw in the state funding for the schools. And the legislature has the power to make decisions that affect what goes on in the city. Just an example, there were two really good programs in Milwaukee Public Schools, because you always hear everything that's wrong with Milwaukee Public Schools. It's the largest district in the state. The year before my grandson started K-5, a SAGE program was in effect. I don't remember what the acronym, the words were, but the effect was that there was a 15-to-1 ratio teacher to children in K-5 through grade 3. After the Republicans came to power and did the redistricting, they ended that program. So when he went to kindergarten the next year, there were 25 to 30 children in the classes. That makes a big difference. There's a reason why the best schools have smaller classes. The university school doesn't have 25 or 30 children in a class. And when you have children of poverty, children who are learning English as a second language, you have children coming from foreign countries speaking different languages, you have children who are homeless, those children need attention. And it's hard for the teacher to give that if they have 30 children in a K-5 class. So then you blame the children and you blame the teachers because they're not teaching the children what they need to know. That's just one example. Then there's housing. Housing is expensive. Affordable housing. How can you get affordable housing on minimum wage? And as I understand it, the state still has a minimum wage of $7 and so many cents. Many businesses have increased that because they're trying to get better workers, but it's still a problem for many people. Affordable childcare. If you have to spend a third or half of your wages on childcare, that is a very difficult situation and compromises your standard of living. And I can't blame the daycare because they have to pay their workers and they're not getting a lot of money. But it's like, we need help for people. These daycares need to be subsidized so that people can afford to send their children there, and so that the daycares can have a good quality of what they are offering the students. So there are a lot of things that the state has the control over that impact our city. We in Milwaukee, because we needed money for our schools, we voted in a referendum to raise our own taxes, to give more to our schools. But we can't keep giving services from the property tax and not getting enough from the state. We want to have perhaps a state tax, raise a sales tax. That's all controlled by the legislature. Let some of the people coming in to enjoy the city and the bucks and all the facilities, let them pay a little bit more. They're coming in, but so much is controlled by the legislator that impacts what we can do in the city. And I see this as a problem. And in my district, I was in a district where we chose a district that was heavily Democratic. We've always lived in a heavily Democratic district where we felt we could have some input over the people we put into office. And then after that redistricting was done, our district was cracked. So we were split apart. The area where I live was for the first time, the districts were always within a county. We were in Milwaukee County. But now my district is linked to 2 other counties. I'm in with Washington and Waukesha County in the district. And it's elongated all the way from Milwaukee up to near Holy Hill. There is no way that my vote counts in my district. I feel like I've been disenfranchised because there's no way that I can get a legislator who is concerned about my views, concerned about Milwaukee, the city that I love, and is willing to work for that city. And I can't get someone elected. The Democrats in our city, or even the independents, the people who care about the city, can't get anyone elected in our district who shares our views and our concerns about our city. Because what affects one person in our city affects all of us. We're all in it together. I want a better city for everyone. And I feel that my voice has been hampered. I feel that my vote has been hampered because of the redistricting and the gerrymandering. And that's a real problem, and we have to do something about it. So I'm happy to be here tonight to share my view, and I'm happy that all of you are here as well.
Thank you so
One
much.
question.
Of course.
I have a question for Helen because of your statement. Does in any way, does that make you feel powerless?
Absolutely. It makes me feel powerless in terms of my vote. I voted in every election. You know, I get out there, and my neighbors and friends who live in my area feel the same way. We just feel like this should not be. Our vote was we were just scattered and joined to this deliberately to make us ineffective in our voting power. It was a deliberate move. And the legislature I have does not come into my area. I've never seen her in my area. I don't get literature. I don't get communication. Before that, the legislators I had lived in my county. They lived in my city. I knew them. They would come to our neighborhood meetings and give us an update on what was going on. They were accessible. In this neighborhood and in our other neighborhood, when we lived near the Capitol Court area, we knew our legislators. We could get to them. We felt like they cared about the city. I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel that this legislator cares about where I live.
Thank you. That really ticks me off now that I'm thinking about it, because being in a controlled environment. So let me bring you inside the prison system, inside the state operated prison system, which gerrymandering absolutely affects. It's not the warden that controls the prisons, it's the attorney general. And how helpless can you be to be confined in a prison and have nothing to say about the district or the community that you live in, that you've been separated from, because they have the power to send you to any of a number of institutions throughout the state where you have no connection, you have no alderman or representative or congressman that you can talk to until you get settled. The biggest issue about the prison thing is that they send you to any prison that they possibly want to at any time they want to, for any reason. And the biggest issue is, biggest downfall in the gerrymandering that I associate with the authority of the Attorney General, the warden, state of Wisconsin, is that it takes all the power from these individuals who may not be politicians who are locked up, but are political prisoners. You know, they're taking resources out of the community that you were convicted in. You know, I mean, people become very educated and very talented and skilled after serving a number of years in prison because they find something to do. But when you can't give back to your community what you've learned, you know, that is awful. And that is another form of gerrymandering and taking away the power and strength of an individual, a community, and the people that it affects. Because every person who is sent to prison has a family member, you know. And when you send them out of state or to a prison which is out of their distance, you're hurting them in the pocket, and in numerous ways. You show no concern for their humanity, you know, their love and respect, you know, to stay in contact, you know. I can say that because I was sent to Tennessee, like 1,500 other people. How do you justify that? You know, but I was affected by gerrymandering in that form and seeing prices of canteen double. You paying $1.25 for a bag of Roman noodles that you could buy at the dollar store for $5 in a pack. Here you paying $1.25 or more for just one. You know, there's no excuse for that. But going back in time, timeline of it is when Walker and Thompson ran the political scene at that time. That's right. And they want to keep as many people as they possibly could in prisons. And so what does that do? It causes mass incarceration, mass supervision. The intent was not to let anyone leave the prison who was associated with a violent crime. And right today, there are a great number of people still in prison because of the old law, because of what Thompson and Walker conjured up. It was a construct to keep people in prison. Where the budget is outrageous. The Department of Correction has a budget bigger than the Capitol. That's right. They employ more people than people work at the Capitol or in the legislature. That's right. Something's wrong with that picture. But how gerrymandering affects us, it hits us in our pockets, our resources.
Yes.
And I better be quiet with that because it's a deep subject.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Talib. I've seen so much conversation in the chat of people being surprised to hear that gerrymandering of our prisons is even one of the tools that they're using to disenfranchise folks. Cheyenne, did you have anything to share for this question? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I could share a bunch. Well, first of all, going off of what Talib just said, yes, there's prison gerrymandering, and then you add another layer of those who are incarcerated and eligible to vote don't have access or the resources to be able to actually cast their ballot in our local jails at the county level specifically. And a big portion of that, especially in our portion of the state, like 90% of our incarcerated population is Native American, and then they're not having access to the ballot. So they're not showing up in our elections. And that's illegal. It actually is a state law that all local jails and prison systems have to have a policy in place for those who are eligible to vote to be able to vote on election day and make an educated decision, not just one going off the chain, and be able to track their ballot after it's already been submitted. So just going off of that, in terms of what's affecting my community, infrastructure all the way. And I'm not just talking about the roads. I'm talking about our economy in general, affordable childcare, especially as we get into rural communities. There's 1 or 2, maybe 3 childcare options, and they are outrageously expensive. Ashland County specifically, where close to where Jade and I grew up, I think it's the 3rd poorest community in the entire state. Access to mental health resources, we don't have that. You have to travel all the way down to like Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to get any substantial long-term care for mental health or opioid addiction. Affordable housing in general, actually. There's no housing in our rural communities right now, not even affordable. So that's a whole nother layer. Yeah, access to see a specialist, for example. I mean, my dad travels from Red Cliff to Duluth, Minnesota, 2 hours, just to come and see a specialist because there's not one in the area for him to see. That shouldn't happen at all. You should not have to travel 2 hours to be able to see a doctor. And then you want to talk about Badger Care, you have to travel to Duluth, Minnesota to utilize their resources. And then you get into the policies where Badger Care is no longer accepted at the same rate on that state level. So people are not able to afford the care they need. Yeah, and you think about gerrymandering, there's policies that have been put on the plate and table for people to vote on, like expanding Medicaid. There was 90,000 people that would have been positively impacted had we included that in Evers' proposal. That was also shot down by Republicans. And I don't just name them as the villain. It doesn't matter if it's Democrats or Republicans, gerrymandering is wrong. And people should care, but here we are. So yeah, I would say infrastructure. That's my ultimate answer. Everything falls under that. And we can't move forward and plan or make anything better if we have an uneven playing field from the jump. So there's been lots of policies that have been proposed, lots of great things and efforts to move forward and create long-term change for our families here in Wisconsin. And you put it on the table, you might as well take it off because they already have an advantage. So.
Thank you all so much for sharing, and thank you, Cheyenne, for mentioning and for clarifying that infrastructure isn't just roads, and it isn't just, you know, what we think as infrastructure with broadband or things like that. Infrastructure is childcare. Infrastructure is mental health care, just healthcare in general. And I think it's really important to recognize that infrastructure is all of the systems that we have in place to keep a system or a society running, and we need childcare and we need healthcare for those things. And so I think it's very important that you pointed that out. Thank you. And thank you all. I'm going to have us move on to the next question here, so that we can get going. What does it look like for you to center frontline communities in the statewide fight for fair maps? What do you feel is oftentimes overlooked? And so we're asking here, what is the importance to you in centering frontline communities in social change work? And when we're asking frontline communities, we're talking about, like we mentioned before, the Black, Brown, Indigenous, and all of the folks who are having all of these negative effects exacerbated by gerrymandering, and they're really, you know, on the front lines. So I'd like to just have this one open to anybody who feels like jumping in. Yeah, how do you feel like frontline communities should be included and centered in this conversation, and how do you feel that they've been overlooked?
I'll jump in and just name, it looks like having more than one public hearing at a different time than 8 in the morning on the middle of a workday. It looks like making sure that your rural community members have the ability to get down there. Yeah, just that's my initial thoughts on that. It looks, as Joe mentioned, if you're gonna make decisions for a community, those community members should be involved in that conversation. Yeah, it looks like respecting treaty rights. It looks like allowing the sovereign nations to have their seat at the table. And yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I
think Tahib mentioned how he does door to door to get people connected. I think that kind of thing is really powerful. And maybe he could expand on that and there's power in unity. Mhm.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Helen. That's my job, canvassing. And the people who should be voting are not allowed to vote, and because of that disenfranchisement, it's causing a big crack in the system, in the operation of it, and us being able to go forward, because people who can vote can't vote because of voter suppression. And that comes in many ways. I mean, just take an average family who has someone locked up, whether it's one person or two people, wants to change something, and they're unable to do so because it takes money to buy, to get a birth certificate. Me speaking as a Black man, I never really thought that much of voting, and I never voted until I got out. And at that time, I saw how important it is that my vote count. So here we are, we're having people want to change the system. You have to vote. You have to vote. So here's a mother with kids who wants to vote, but don't have money enough to buy the birth certificate, or don't have it. Many times you lose things when you move and stuff like that. And so that is voter suppression, when that person can't vote because, hey, they got to put food on the table. You get $600 a month, and your kids eat. You got 4 or 5 kids, and you're not talking about taking the money out of their mouth, go get a piece of paper so you can vote, because they don't reason with that. They just don't see eye to eye with that. It don't add up. And so that's part of voter suppression. Where I'm coming from is that there are a lot of people let out of institutions who cannot vote. And on a daily basis, people are let out. People are held in the community in these facilities who cannot vote. You have people out right here on the street with life sentences, but they can't vote. Or they can't vote until the next 15, 20 years. But every day of their life, up until that very point that they can vote, they are paying taxes. So here we have taxation without representation. That's a bad. It's a remedy. It is a remedy. And it's sad to say the Department of Correction is the biggest retirement agency in the world. That's right. When you let a person out from prison and they still can't vote, that's sad. It's sick. Really think about it. Let's do the math. You know what I mean? So we're looking for numbers. We're looking at all these people trickling out of prison on a daily basis, but they can't vote. So how do we change that? So here I am on the ground, boots on the ground, to find out who can vote. Hey, or you can vote, because they don't know it. Every convicted person, you lose your right to vote. That's right, just because you've been locked up. But now here you are free, and that right is now restored. Something's wrong with that picture. So I'm to come to your door or that person's door and try to explain it to you. And many people don't know they can vote until you talk to them and share the information. Information is knowledge, is strength, and we're being outnumbered because the division, So that's my job, is to, with Moses, boots on the ground, get out to vote. So that's where I am. And that's what I have to share about that. And I'm sticking to my story.
Thank you, Talib. Thank you. Cheyenne, I see that you wrote in the chat.
Yeah, Francis asked a real great question. What messaging techniques can be effective? Well, we use deep canvassing. Talib might use that as well. We use race, class, narrative messaging specifically to combat the dog whistle racism that is deployed into all of the messaging that our public hears. There's lots of misinformation that is pushed into our minds, whether it be on the news, social media, etc. And it's used to divide us. A good example of that, here in Wisconsin, you'll hear folks in the northwest portion of the state make a comment about inner city folks. And we all know we're talking about Black people. We're not just talking about inner city. Like, just say, call it what it is if you're going to say it, but that's dog whistle racism right there. And so to combat that, you use race class narratives, and then you use deep canvassing, which is really rooted in honest conversations based in lived experiences, like Talib, for example. So you would share a story and say, hey, gerrymandering affected my family a lot. My mom has diabetes and currently makes $150 too much to get on Badger Care. So I just shared a personal story, then I would ask you to do the same. And by connecting on that human to human level, you're much more likely to move someone down the chain than you are just by saying, hey, you're wrong. And yeah, I would be happy to send some information to anybody who would like to know more about that too.
If I may, with your permission, here in Stockbridge-Munsee, we're in Shawano County, very rural, heavily agriculture centered surrounding us, and the surrounding counties is very heavily agriculture. And that's all these folks have ever known. And I'm going to tell you something. In my younger day, I've baled hay, I've shoveled cow manure, I've done all that with my friend's house, because we were friends. We were going to school together. Things have changed now, and I don't know whether or not it's tied to gerrymandering or what, but I think it could be. The emphasis now is no longer on the small family farm that I grew up helping. And now they're called CAFOs, these concentrated animal feeding operations. Right here in the township immediately to our west, in the township of Almond in Shawano County, there are 4. One of them might be, if not the largest, the second largest in the state of Wisconsin. So 15,000 animal units, which an animal unit is not the same as head of cattle. An animal unit is based on 1,000 pounds. So, you know, you could have 15,000 animal units, but if they have their young stock, you could have 2 young stock making up 1 animal unit. So the number is skewed. Why I'm getting at this, it was mentioned earlier about subsidies. I think, my apologies, somebody mentioned subsidies earlier, and it hit to the core of what I refer to as corporate welfare, corporate subsidies, and these large animal operations, these agricultural operations, millions of dollars in government subsidies, just so they can have all these cows producing all this manure, polluting the groundwater, the air quality for generations to come. And I know these folks. I went to school with them. And I don't think they want to drink dirty water, but I just don't understand the mentality here in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to the agriculture industry and the influence it has. So not everybody, you know, and me and in Stockbridge-Munsee and Menominee combined, surrounded, we have to deal with groundwater. We have to monitor it. We have to monitor air quality. Fortunately, we have the resources to do it. But when it comes time to find a spill or an event that potentially could be hazardous, the trucks, the manure hauling trucks, especially in the springtime, busting up the roads, these are all things we have to deal with. So if whether or not, and in Shawano County, there are four assembly districts in Shawano County, 4 different. Why? You know, Eastern Shawano County, Northwestern Shawano County, the whole center part of the county, if you have a map. And then in a very tiny little bottom there, there's the village of Marion, which extends from Waupaca County into Shawano County. And that portion in Shawano County is in the other assembly districts. So we have 4 assembly districts. So we have to go to 4 assemblymen and talk. And it just so happens, one of our current assemblymen, in Gary Tauken, who I know and I respect, but his family has one of these capitals in Eastern Shawano County. So when it goes time to go to the county board and talk about potential in the Land Conservation Committee, which I'm part of, and the potential groundwater contamination, air pollution contamination, I don't know if it's falling on open ears or if it's falling on deaf ears. I don't know if that can be gerrymandered back out of that or not, but it is an instance that I'm trying to articulate of how different political influences can happen and can have effect on not only my community, but the other Indian communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we're getting pretty close on time here. And so I want to move on. I did see though that Melody, you did unmute. Did you want to answer the question about what does it look like to center frontline communities and how you might feel frontline communities and their voices have been overlooked?
Yes, well, I know as far as in my experience, I make my calls every day. I've made appointments to meet with my legislators pre-COVID, and that's when I was in Virginia. And I just find it very annoying that as a person, a believer in we the people and our elected officials work for us, why aren't we not able to get connected with them on a timely manner? Why are we not able to get the answers to the very questions that we need for the moment in the time? You know, for instance, when Trump was the leader of the United States, the tyrant anyway, why is it that I was not able to relay a message to the White House? You know, I ask a question and they'll hang up. You know, it's like, what's really going on? You know, and I really believe that we continue to ignore this issue, which is already a threat to our society, to the way we live. The fact that they're controlling, they're dictating, they're not answering, they're not living up to the oaths that they supposed to have taken to uphold to protect us from threats, foreign and domestic. You know, I just, it's at all. And for me, and I just believe that we the people need to do not take no for an answer. We must make our voices heard. We must continue to write to them. We must continue to peacefully protest. That is our right. And an unfortunate COVID has stopped a lot of that. And I think that I really believe that they are using that to their advantage. Why isn't there no accountability? We cannot move forward as a society until there's accountability for everything, for the mishandling of the COVID, to the false electors trying to basically, they've committed a crime by messing with our elections. How are we to know what is right for us in the moment if we don't know who's actually being in charge and doing it with good conscience?
Thank you, Melody. Yeah, I think that it's very important. Just like that's what gerrymandering is, right? It's legislators who have these safe seats who don't have to listen to us. And that's why we're doing all of our work, all of our hard work. And like you said, we just have to keep pushing and keep making our calls and keep doing the hard work. And so that kind of moves us to our next question that I have for you folks. And I kind of want to set this up in give a little bit of context before I ask this question. I acknowledge that resistance and resilience can have kind of a different meaning for different folks. A lot of folks can find pride in it and have a badge where you're very proud to wear this badge of resistance and resilience. But oftentimes resistance and resilience is a burden that we don't get to choose to bear. And it's something that we are choosing to do because we must. And so with this next question, it's what resistance and resilience practices from your communities would you like to uplift in the face of adversity or the stagnation of progress, especially with how the Fair Maps fight has been going? How are you staying hopeful for change?
I'll jump in. I'll just say locally getting involved. I think specifically I sat in an Ashland City Council meeting and I got to listen to my cousin Sandy Goki question the way that the city itself is going to be drawing their map district. And yeah, I think that's what gives me hope, is you can have these conversations on the federal level, but really where the impact and the more control you're going to have, you're going to see that show up at the local level. So yeah, I think that just really, it gives me hope. Obviously those small things that we're doing in our rural communities, the ultimate goal is to create some long lasting change, and hopefully up at the federal level. But yeah, I think my answer is just get involved at local level, and don't be silent, even if it's a small community and everybody knows your name. So
I agree with that. And I think I was really heartened to see so many groups participating in the whole map drawing up their own maps and submitting maps and studying the whole thing. I thought that was amazing. Individuals and different politicians and different groups, a lot of people were looking at these districts and finding different ways and fairer ways, because we want it to be as fair as possible. We know that gerrymandering can go on both sides and everyone wants it to their advantage. But what's wrong with a bipartisan group to make the final decision so that one group doesn't and have it so that the people know, not behind closed doors. So that I was heartened by that, to see so many grassroots people really stepping up and submitting maps, even though they might not have gone anywhere. It's raising awareness. I think people know. I'm also heartened by different places where they've had referendums about gerrymandering, even though they weren't binding. Just the fact of getting people to vote on it. And it seems that like most citizens would support fair elections. That's my understanding, that most citizens support fair elections. And to get that word out there, I guess I feel like we can't give up. We've got to keep pushing forward and eventually hope that something will break and something will happen that's positive.
You know, there's an old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, it couldn't be more simpler in what we're doing here and making our voices and our faces with our voices hopefully being heard. That, you know, that's first and utmost importance.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a name scroll across the bottom. I don't have my cheaters on, but I think I read it correctly, and I got a shout out to Dave Rash. He's been an elder in this community and very, very highly respected. And I just wanted to say shout out to Dave. There he is. He's been around the block. So just a quick shout out, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We need to continue this by all means and have more folks willing to step up to the plate. Until then, we're going to have to deal with it. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with that. Together we stand and divided we fall, you know, so it still falls upon the we the people, you know. Together we stand, divided we fall. You can make a difference in the numbers, you see. So when one stand up, everybody should stand up. Even if you don't believe it to the very end of the sentence, stand up, you know, because we all have this inevitable right to stand up for what is right. and forbid what is wrong. And we have common sense. Nobody's here on this screen, on this panel, or out there in the audience, or don't have common sense. We know right from wrong. And so it's about standing up for what is right. Now, the difference is not understanding what gerrymandering is. So hopefully, the call to action is learn more about this gerrymandering, how it affects you, your community, and the people you love. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing to everyone, thank you, and all that are watching, thank you for being here. But one thing that I want to express, and most importantly, is I want people to understand that we do have the power. In fact, we do. We just got to believe it. I understand that, you know, forces of the money is, you know, in the way right now, but we cannot let that get in the way. We cannot let that deter us. We cannot let their ignorance be the force of what we're supposed to be in this nation. No, we have to overcome that. So it's going to take all of us. And again, I go back to the question is, where are our legal tools that we can use? Because the right is using the rule of law to undermine our democracy. What can we use? What do we have? Because I don't know it all. I'm not a lawyer. To use to strengthen our democracy. We have it. This civil war that keeps being thrown out there that I'm sure some people want, but not a person like me, and I'm sure not any of you. But when you put someone in a corner for so long and you keep them there, you keep them silent, what do you expect is going to happen? So again, this is a fight for our democracy against tyranny, and let's do it with love. Ignorant, greedy politicians out, one way or another. We need to find a way.
Thank you so much, Melody. Thank you all. And that is leaving me quite
Jade, you're on mute, girl.
goodness gracious. Okay, I'm here. Thank you so much all for sharing. And I'm just going to get into our last question here. We're actually a minute over time. But where do you think we go from here in the redistricting process? And some of you had started to get into that. And so I think you all led us really well into our last question. But where do we go from here in the redistricting process? How do you think this process could be changed for the better? And what is the importance of having tribal leadership, Native nations, and frontline community leaders like yourselves, having your voices heard and included into this process? And I'd just love to hear that.
I would like to say that when it comes to the tribal leaders and Native Americans, for one, they're the true American. So there should not be no doubt or no debate on whether you can vote or not. Let's just get that off the table right now. And we need to hold on to that and believe that. Now, as far as all of us getting together and making sure that we all know who's running. I've gotten over 1,500 people to vote that never voted in their lives, from New York to Wisconsin to Virginia. And they kept, at first, I don't like politics. Politics ain't for me. But you know what? We have to remind people that politics is what affects our lives. And, you know, you may not care politics, but you care that you're paying $4, $5 for milk. You care that your childcare is high, your housing is high, your medical bills and your prescriptions are high, you know. So don't tell me you don't care about politics, because if you live in this country and you're working and you want to live safe and comfortable, you have to care about what's going on and how our government is working for us or not. And then we have to step up.
Mhm.
I feel like Helen, you look like you have some great knowledge to spew onto this conversation.
I was actually thinking of you, Cheyenne, and what you had
Shoot.
said about the importance of when you're connecting with people, telling your personal story. When you perceive someone as being different, but if you hear their story, they become human to you. And I think that's important. I would like to see churches connect more, the Milwaukee church connect with the church up north, get people together, because we say we all believe in the same thing, but you're fearful of us, we're fearful of you. Maybe there's some common ground that we can work toward. So I think that people connection, keep telling our stories. I think that is so important, because we want to get to the hearts and minds of people and help them to understand that people just want to live. People want an opportunity. Everyone wants to be a part of the American dream, and it's not about taking something from someone else. It's about allowing everybody to have those opportunities. Some people were given more than others here. When I was up at Old World, Wisconsin one year, have you ever been to Old World, Wisconsin? It's up in Milwaukee, and they have villages, actual villages, Norwegian village, and then they have all the different villages. They actually bought the buildings, deconstructed them from certain places and put them there. And so they have different villages from different ethnicities. They even have a Black representation from Mount Pleasant, where some African Americans had settled, and they have the schoolhouse and the church. But when I was in the Strawberry School, which was in one of the Scandinavian village, there was a teacher there, and they dressed in the period costumes, and we were sitting at the desks, and my grandchildren were there, and she had the ruler, and she told how in the old days the teacher had these rulers, and they would, spank the kids if they didn't get their homework. But she also shared how when her people came there, they got, when they immigrated, they got 120 acres of land free. Everybody didn't get those opportunities. So we didn't all start at the same level when we got here. So just keep sharing that message that we all want to be a part of this democracy. We all want to be treated as equals, and we all want opportunities. That's what we have to work toward.
Helen mentions education, and it would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the first Wisconsin public school teacher, Electa Quinney.
Oh,
Mohican.
really?
Mohican. In a village in the city of Kaukauna, there was the Electa Quinney School and a memorial there to her. But that's the first Wisconsin public school teacher was a Mohican person.
That's wonderful.
Dave, as old as he is, he remembers her from back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And education has always been, as I stated earlier, has been a philosophy, and to educate people, for ourselves to be educated, as
Yes.
you mentioned about getting to actually know what gerrymandering will do and how it affects, that's critical.
Yes.
My hat's off to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew Helen had some awesome knowledge to spew with us. I knew it.
I don't know. I'm thinking, talk to myself, I was dumber than a bag of hair,
So the one-on-ones really make a difference. One-on-ones will make a difference, and the more you can get involved, that's how we change. That's how we make a change. That's how we reverse the gerrymandering. That's right. So do those one-on-one, share this information, and this information change people. That's right.
Who are these different people? Right?
My last thought is just meet people where they're at. We can educate them,
That's
but if
right.
you come in talking like saying gerrymandering and they don't know what you're talking about, you have to meet them where you're at. You're gonna scare
Sure,
them
you're
off.
right. You have to
So-
educate them. That's right. Take the time and explain to them what it is, you know, ABCs of gerrymandering. That's right. It not only changes districts, it's, I mean, there's more meanings to that. You know, it changes power from one place to another place. You know what I mean? Economically, it does. So there's more than one way to see gerrymandering because it's like
Tell Jade to point that out.
I love it. Education, one-to-ones, just having conversations, keeping hope, staying resilient. This is all super powerful, and I love hearing from all of you. Is there anything else that any of you all would like to add before we give our final thoughts here to our participants and let everybody go?
It's been a pleasure.
I just want to say one thing. I'm
course.
sorry, Joe.
That much earlier before we ran.
Let's hear it, Melody. That's totally okay.
I'm sorry. I just want to say that us as citizens, let's start looking at each other as brothers and sisters, and let's make this promise. Knowing the constitutional responsibility, right? It is, you know, our civic duty, moral in our conduct, responsible citizenship is for the people, not for the dishonest people. I'm sorry, not sorry, but not deceitful people or people who are willing to break the law of any kind. We need to set that line in the sand. And I keep saying this, like I said, it is the fight for our democracy against tyranny. And we know the good, and we see what's the bad right now, and they're showing their colors quite blatantly. So let's stay kind, stay peaceful, keep the love, but don't take no crap.
Well said.
yeah. On another note, you know, the framers of the Constitution did many things right, and they did many things wrong. What they didn't do right is enshrine the constitutional right to vote in the original text. So, you know, it didn't include us. It included the people who had the power were the farm owners, people who had all the slaves. So, you know, just take a look at it. You know what I mean? 1887, before they ratified it in 1890. Hey, 3 men was just was a fifth of 1 man. You know, that's right. So just think about it. You know, we have a lot of work to do, but the creators of the Constitution, framers of the Constitution didn't do. They left undone those things they ought to have done. That's right, and that was enshrined into the Constitution, the right to vote. That's why we're here, and that's why we're fighting on the ground in our boots.
And I'd like to tell a little story just on that. As I said, I'm a member of St. Mark African Methodist Episcopal Church, and our founder was Ezekiel Gillespie. He was one of our founders, Ezekiel Gillespie. He came to Wisconsin in about 1855. And in 1869, the church was founded. They sent to our bishop. We had a bishop then because our church was actually founded, the mother church, in the late 1700s, but that's another story. But the church in Milwaukee was founded in 1869, and Ezekiel Gillespie was one of the founders. Well, it turns out that he also was instrumental in getting the vote for Blacks in Wisconsin, because right after the Civil War, he went along with 15 Black men down to Milwaukee, to wherever they were voting, to vote, and they were told they could not vote. He took it to court, and after a legal battle in 1866, the Supreme Court of the state unanimously decided that Blacks did have the right to vote in Wisconsin. So that's Ezekiel Gillespie. There's a diorama about him in the Milwaukee Museum. He is buried at Forest Home Cemetery, which was the only cemetery that would bury Black people back in the day. And at my church, I was on a committee that erected a very nice memorial for him about 10 years ago, because we took the original little tombstone and put it in the churchyard. So that's my story about Black history and voting Black in Milwaukee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing from the St. Mark African Methodist Episcopal Church. Now I know. Now I can pronounce it. Thank you so much. So let's just stay loud. Let's keep pushing. And yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight.